Welcome everyone. Good morning. For those of you I haven't met yet, I'm Nicole Wood. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders here at Vida alongside Forum, who's joining us today. Thank you, Forum, for hanging with us. We'd love to hear from you. So I'm sure you'll have some great things to share and some deep questions for Donald. So we love it. This is Honest Leadership. So thank you for joining this series. First, for those of you who are new to the Vida community, we are a leadership and career coaching company with a mission to help people love their lives. That's the meaning of our name. And one of our core beliefs is that you shouldn't have to wait until 5 or 6 or 7 p.m. when you get home from work to start loving your life. Work can be meaningful, work can be good. And that is what we support our clients to do, both in their careers and as leaders, because both of those things shape your experience at work, and what we work with our clients to do. And we created this Honest Leadership series because leadership is tough. It's messy. There's no playbook. You're figuring it out. You're winging it a lot of the time, and it can feel lonely, but it doesn't have to. And so what we are trying to do with this series is bring incredible experts like Donald, who are leaders and innovative and experts in their field, to come here and get real with us and have honest conversations about both their successes and failures as a leader, and to share on a topic that's important to them. So we're really excited about this conversation today. And with that, I will introduce Donald, and this is where you get to listen to me read your bio, which is always beautifully awkward. Donald is the CPO at Greenhouse Software. He leads with a people-first mentality, hoping to unlock the potential of greenhouse talent globally, with a laser focus on the connection between people and the processes that serve them. Donald and his team create proximity by building bridges, focusing on enhanced experiences that nurture culture and develop people. He is responsible for providing global strategy and leadership in developing, overseeing, and administering people programs. Before Greenhouse, Donald served as Senior Vice President of Global Talent for Edelman, where he helped shape the HR brand as a proactive, insightful, and collaborative solution partner. And I can say this is a really special event for us as well, because not only is Donald a genius and brilliant and a friend, but he's also a client. And so we can attest to these values that he upholds as a leader and what he chooses to invest in and focus on at Greenhouse, because he is a partner of Vida, and we get to see that and witness it firsthand. So thank you for being here, Donald, and spending this next hour with us.
Thank you for having me. This is amazing. You didn't have to read the bio. That's a marketing team thing, but I really really excited.
It's important, and I think I loved your bio because it speaks not just to your accomplishments, but your values that we're going to get into and talk about. So I thought it was helpful for those who are newer to you to get to hear that and some of your work, and then we'll dig into that as well. So let's get into it, because we have a lot to cover, and I definitely want to make sure that we have time for questions from the group as well. So let's start. As with coaching, many times before we move forward, we go back a little bit. I would love to hear, you studied system design and project leadership in college, and I would love to know what that means. But as I was reading a little bit of a description of it, it seems like already there's this orientation around human behavior and how people show up at work. Was that already of interest to you? How did you land on that? Tell me a little bit more about how you selected this for your profession.
No, I'm not one of those people who just wanted to grow up and be in the people business or people in HR teams by any stretch of the imagination. Most of my life I've been guided by three groups of people. There's people that I'm like going through life with. Like when I became a father, there was guys that became a father. When I became a parent, I had friends that became moms, and I kind of view those people as like soundboards. They're like people that I can just like bounce things off of in life, but we're kind of like going through life around the same time. There's people that I consider to be like sandpaper, like Forum for me is sandpaper. She's not afraid to like tell me the things that I need to hear, regardless of I'm thinking about those things or not. And I think you need those kind of people. They smooth out like the edges of your leadership, and they make you, in my opinion, a more well-rounded person. And then there's people that are like, I call them senseis. They're like people that have gone ahead of me in life, and they're where I aspire to be. And they impart wisdom and guidance and thought for me. They also serve as like a great source of encouragement. That sensei for me, her name is Kay Kennedy. And every stage that I get an opportunity to like talk about her, I do. Kay is in her late 60s, early 70s now. And She was my first chief human resource officer, but not for her, I would not have been in this profession. I wanted to be an attorney. Like it was
Mm,
very clear where I wanted to go. And the reason I wanted to be an attorney is because my parents divorced early on in my life, and their attorneys could not like get the deal done, for lack of better words. And I saw like how it was like ripping away like my brothers and sisters and my two brothers and sister. And so I really just sat them down and was just like, listen, this is what you get. This is what you need to get. I'm going to email the lawyers. We're not doing this again. And I got them to agree.
wow.
I thought my calling was to like do that. But Kay really like changed my mentality and told me like there's a way that I connect with people. She was like, listen, my profession is changing. We're gonna need people like you, but everything in life is a system. And if you don't understand the various systems that you're placed within, it makes it very difficult to be successful. So like
Mm,
academics is a system, it's a system of learning. And unfortunately, just wanting to be a great learner is not the only system at play. There's also a social system inside of educational systems. There's also this component around like, how do you show up every day? And like, are you comfortable being yourself, or do you have to like only show glimpses of yourself? Um, my friend Hella would say you have to be strategically vulnerable in certain systems where you're
hmm.
not able to be your full self all the time. And so, but not for those things, I would not have went into the profession, but I needed to go understand, how do I operate in these corporate systems? How do I operate in these organizational systems? And then like really design leadership based on that particular project. So being a leader, a CPO in healthcare is being very different than a CPO in tech. And there's a lot of nuances that are the same, but there's a lot of nuances that are different. And people who don't understand how to like get inside of that system and then like almost like deconstruct it to figure out, what do I need to do to be successful? They find it very difficult, and there's tons of headwinds. And so that's how I went into systems design and project leadership, and it has served me very well in my career. But I recognize that I'm merely the illustration of people who like poured into me along the way. And the hard work stuff is probably like 10%. The 90% is tons of people who gave me chances and poured into me.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that about systems. And I think probably even a step before folks who don't know how to navigate them is even recognizing that you're part of one. Like so many of us are just showing up, doing our thing, and not even realizing all the different forces that are at play that are shaping that experience. So that's a really interesting and useful background that you have been able to apply in so many different aspects of your work. And it seems like, and I'm curious because from the LinkedIn stalking I've done of you in preparation for this, I mean, there's like a period of your career where it's like boom, 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 you're rising through the ranks. Next thing you know, you're CPO at one of these leading tech firms. I'm sure once you started figuring out how all these things work, that could work in your favor. So was climbing the ladder your focus? What was that an aspect of how you were using your knowledge of these systems? And did you feel impostery along the way?
Yeah. Wow, we're getting deep today. This is gonna be good.
Yeah, let's go.
I think, yeah, I'm the eldest of four. So for me, like there's security in success, particularly like financial success. There's security there, at least growing up. That's what my perception was. And so yeah, I was very intentional in trying to make sure that I really take hold of my life. I think Sheryl Sandberg would say lean in, but like it's just being very intentional. Like I don't believe every organization is deserving of my time, talent, and treasure. And so I'm very strategic about where I park that. If the average person works, what, 90,000 hours in their lifetime?
Mm-hmm.
Like we
Yep.
should be very selective where we give those 90,000 hours. And I know someone's listening, they're like, Donald, I got bills, like I got kids. I get it. But that's even more important why you should be very selective where you spend your time. Because if you don't, what kind of version of you do they get when you get home? Like what kind of version of you does your family and friends get if you're, parking your time, talent, and treasure at a place you're not actually excited to be around? So yeah, the ambition or the intentionality in my career, that's a big one. But I really anchored on these three things. I had a head of HR named Gerald Hill. He's at Fiserv now. He's a phenomenal human. If anybody knows him, you can credit him for a lot of my success. But he really like broke it down for me and um, in business and climbing, there's three different components. There's performance, image, and exposure. And as a country, like at least in America, we over-index on performance in our talk track, which is unfair and completely misleading because performance is only like 20% of the game. I know some of the most smartest people. They went to some of the greatest schools on the planet, and they're great performers, but they're not thriving in their careers because all they focus on is purely performance. And it's not enough. And so what I found is image and exposure are super important. Like 30% of the game, in my opinion, is image, which is not like what clothes you're wearing. I can care less about that. It's like, how are you perceived? Like if you're talking to Nicole, one thing if you talk to Nicole and Forum very quickly, they listen first. They're not quick to speak, like they're always listening first. I think that's a sign of a phenomenal coach because they can figure out, pick their spots on how they move you from point A to point Z. But like I think that's an amazing coaching attribute. But that's what image is for me. It's like, how are you perceived? Are you a great collaborator? Do you show up on time? When the team needs someone to stay late, are you willing to stay late? Like before this call, I looked at the time slot that we had and I asked, I asked Nicole, I was like, hey, like, are we supposed to go that far? And she was like, no, me and my team, we do a debrief afterwards. Like, it's a cool thing. But like that level of intentionality that shapes the way that people perceive what happens when you work with this young lady. And then the last one for me is like exposure, which is, that's why I credit so many people that came before me. It's like I was put in places and put in rooms that talent and education just don't get you. Like some of the deals that I got to work on, some of the exposure I got to get in my career, it was purely because someone gave me that exposure. Now they gave me that exposure because I had great coaches along the way, or they saw potential along the way. But what I found is that's like the exposure is like 50%. And unfortunately, if you don't have that exposure, you find yourself falling behind from where you might want to be. And that's why I think coaching is so important. One of the easiest ways to leapfrog wherever you are today and where you want to go is to have an outside perspective from someone that you can value and trust. And this is where I think, again, I think Amala Vida is super important because we don't know it all. Like I've been on this planet a little less than 40 years. I don't know it all. And the more I live, the more I learn I don't know nearly as much as I thought I did. So having helpers along the way, I think is helpful. But yeah, that's what I believe. I accredit that level of ascension to your point, Nicole, around how did I get here? And it's really understanding performance, image, and exposure, and like really leaning on coaches like yourself to help me get where I want to go.
First of all, I appreciate you being honest about that. Like, I think there a lot of us, and we see this with our clients too, when they come in, there's like some shame around saying, like, I want to earn this amount of money, or this title is important to me. And what we try to always remind people is like, that's okay. Lifestyle is a big factor. Feeling that credibility and that validation and feeling recognized for your work, like that's not shameful to care about those things, especially as you said, being driven. And I was similar. Like it was funny hearing how you just talked about the experience with your parents. Mine was similar. I was like, I'm good at math and I see my parents struggle. So how do I take math and make money? Business. Like that, you're shaped by all these experiences throughout your life. And it's okay that those are part of the story. But there's all these other factors that are in. And I love what you're saying, because the other thing we see all the time with clients is people are like, I'm keeping my head down. I'm doing great work. Why am I not getting the results that I want? And it is those other factors that you're talking about. And it can be frustrating because you're like, I don't want to have, there's an aversion. Like people feel like it's like playing the game, but it's also, to your point, there's ways to do it authentically. And it is about trust and respect and all the things that we'll talk about as well. One of the things, even in your bio, and that is really central to your brand and identity, is this concept of people first. I actually loved on your People First podcast, the one that Forum joined, Paul from Uber mentioned every company's people first. The question is which people. Like that really landed with me. And I was just having a conversation with my father-in-law, who's in the investment world, and he was like, people don't like the Costco stock right now because Costco puts employees first, clients, customers second, and shareholders third. And they love investments that are the reverse of that. And I was like, you know what? I still think that's a good investment. I'll take your word for it. But what does people first mean to you, and how do you think about which people?
Yeah. First of all, you really did your homework. That podcast with Forum, Paul Saidi from Uber, and Will Leahy, who's our VP of People Success, is one of my favorite conversations, like with just humans. Like in my life, that one's gonna go down because there was so much just like raw conversation that was real. And I don't know if enough people have that in their day-to-day. People first to me, honestly, it's I feel like we've forgotten how to be human.
Mm,
Like I think when it comes to business, we have focused so much on things like productivity and efficiency and how are we driving revenue and how are we driving profit. And it's like those things are major elements, but like at the end of the day, we're humans. Like, and like people need to feel like they matter to you. The number one expense at any company is also their greatest asset, which is people. It There was no electricity before people created it. There was no ride share before people created it. And so for me, it's like I try to create these environments where people can breathe. Like I want humans to be humans. I've worked at companies that were very suffocating and it stifled my creativity, it stifled my innovation, it hindered the way that I could collaborate with other people because you had leaders who wanted to pit what they deemed as top talent against one another. And I'm like, listen, if that's what you're looking for, I'm just not that guy. Like, I grew up playing team sports. My parents were military. Both of them told me, like, without other humans, they would not still be alive. Like, they've seen some very difficult times wearing the nation's uniform. And so, like, for me, it was like, in the environments I go in, I want people to have oxygen. And oxygen to me is like not just being seen, valued, and heard. Like I think those are super important. But like just this idea of like being a person. So like our folks on our team, sometimes people would call in, they're like, hey, can we push this meeting back? Like my daughter got sick. I need to take her to the hospital. Absolutely. What? You don't have to, there's no shame in that. If you go to my LinkedIn, you'll see I put Dalen's dad on there, which is important because I want people to understand like my most important title is being a dad. All this CPO stuff, like it's fun, I like it, but like my first and foremost responsibility is making sure he's successful because I brought him here with his mom. And so I want people to have that human element when they're around me. And so and I think that's what's missing so much from business and leadership. Like you look 20 years ago, 30 years ago, words like vulnerability, words like transparency, words like empathy, those things didn't show up in like your leadership course. That's not what MBAs were being taught. And so at least if you experience me, I want you to feel that. I want you to feel the difference of what it feels like to have someone who looks at you as a person first. And the
yeah.
business decisions that I get to influence, I think about how they influence people. It doesn't mean I don't have to make difficult decisions sometimes or have difficult conversations. I do, but I always think about the people aspect of it and like try to figure out like, how do I make sure when this person walks away from this conversation or they walk away from this business decision that they understand that we consider the impact that it would have on them or their teams? Like, I don't know if enough people in business do that. I do see the tides changing though. I see a
Mhm.
number of leaders in very strategic locations where I feel like we're getting around or business is evolving and understanding that, listen, at the end of the day, we're all people. So
Yeah. Do you feel like COVID accelerated that? Because I feel like for as much as we became displaced in all of these ways and physically separated, there was just such a like disarming effect of like seeing people's living rooms or people's cats walk across their computer screen or kids pop up. And I too, in the same way, where I really am intentional and think about those things. Like, I'm not going to apologize for that, just like I don't expect my team to, because we are people and we have families and we have all this stuff that's going on. And I feel in a way, COVID was just such a great forcer for that to happen versus just waiting years and years for people to come around to the idea of vulnerability or letting people in on their humanness.
yeah, Nicole, I'm inclined to agree with you um, in theory. Like I
Yeah.
with you. I think the side effects of being able to see people's cats, dogs, gerbils, kids, runny noses, kids trying to hop on Zoom calls, parents having to get up, and then the proverbial Zoom outfit where you have a nice blouse or Oxford shirt on combined with like amazing Christmas pajama pants. I mean, like
So good.
I think that helped. I think the dilemma that I have though is there's a core group of leaders out there where when they saw that, they said, no, this is not what you do in business. And like
Mm,
many of those leaders are now digging in on their heels saying, no, we need to return back to the way things were. A part of me is empathetic for them because I understand many of them got to where they got in their business and in their career, and only an aspect of business life where that was true, where you had to go
right.
to the office every day. So I have empathy for people like that because I'm like, oh, like you've only been successful one way. Right.
Mm,
I get it. Like you haven't seen success a different way. And so this is new for you. It's hard,
it's
right?
fear-based for
Yeah.
sure.
And so I kind of equate it back to, so I agree with you. I think that helped accelerate like people that are wanting to be people. I don't think it's the greatest acceleration though. I think the greatest acceleration is like demographics. Like
Mm,
women are more educated than men now. For the first time in humanity, there's more women that are educated, which means there's a larger pool to put women in positions of leadership. And that means they get to influence what happens in the spaces where they lead. They're outperforming men when for you look at women CEOs when compared to male CEOs, they're outperforming. Same thing with diversity. McKinsey says that 38% of companies that are more diverse outperform their counterparts. So if you have more diverse people in business, you have more women in business, you have more people of color in business, they're going to be way more open to the way that we navigate business moving forward. And they're influencing leaders that may have been the majority in the past. Like,
yeah.
I have two Jewish co-founders, but they're phenomenal human beings. And they're so open. Like we took the company completely distributed. They understood. They're like, listen, we like in-person collaboration too, but like, Donald, you're right. We've seen great success with people having this flexibility. And so we're all in. So they're becoming more influenced by this changing demographic inside of the workforce as well. And so I think that helped aid a lot of that. I think the other thing that has helped aid, which this is called honest leadership, so I'm gonna be honest with you. I
Yeah.
think we've seen some of the most difficult times in humanity over the last 3 to 4 years. And like no one wants, I think it's a little taboo to talk about it, but like this idea of like mindfulness and well-being and like not just being burned out because of the work you're doing, but burned out emotionally.
Hmm.
Like everyone on the planet remembers where they were when they saw George Floyd. They remember where they were when certain rights for either the LGBTQ plus community or for women came under siege. Like they know where they were. And regardless of where you fall in the continuum, and I'm not here to discuss that. My thing is like, you remember where you were. These are major
Yeah.
seismic events. And so I think that in itself is also forcing us as humans to say, am I okay with the proverbial legacy social contract between an employer and an employee? Am I okay with the leadership that I saw demonstrated, or am I willing to demonstrate courage and demonstrate a different level of leadership? And I think this forum itself, no pun intended, is an example of that, right? Like Nicole, like you and your team, like to have a space where we talk about honest leadership. What was that? Like
Yeah.
20 years ago, it was all about spin and making sure that you control the narrative. So I think times are changing and I think they're evolving. And I think this newest generation that has joined the workforce is going to hold us even more accountable because they've seen extremes on both sides.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that because you brought up a lot of the things that have happened in the past 4 years. And that is a lot of what we want to talk about today. And I think it's so amazing that we're holding leaders accountable, that back to where we started, where you're like 20 years ago, these weren't topics. And 20 years ago, we let a lot of bad behavior go, frankly. There was a different mentality of what we would accept from leaders, that we are holding leaders to a different standard today. And also, it's still confusing for a lot of leaders right now of like, what is my role in this? What is right? What is wrong? What is helpful? What is not? So I'd love to hear your take on things like those big events you mentioned, and what is a leader's job in responding to those, either publicly or internally within the organization, because I think there's still, I know personally, I have internal debate of like, should I make a statement? Is my silence deafening? Like what is the right thing to do? And I think some of us are still figuring out our personal philosophies on that. So I'd love to hear from you and what you've seen with your organization.
Yeah. First, I would say Greenhouse is a very people first organization, and we try to we're cognizant that, particularly in a distributed organization, that the things that happen outside the office or outside of our organization influence the way people show up inside the office or inside our organization. We're very much mindful of that. And
Yeah.
so we try to make sure we navigate accordingly. I think for me personally, um, I think there's a lot of people in the world that are hurting. And I think they need, if you're in a role of leadership, in my opinion, we are uniquely qualified to help people heal. When I say heal, I mean, it's an acronym. Like, I think you have to be honest, number one, even if you don't know the right answer. Like, there's multiple wars being fought right now in the world, and like some people don't know what to say. And it's okay to say with honesty, I don't know what to say. Like, I know
Yeah.
this is occurring and I don't know what to say, but like I want you to recognize that I know this is happening in the world. I think the second one is like empathy, which is like, you don't have to walk in someone else's shoes to be empathetic for the shoes that they walk in. And so
Yeah.
like, I have a lot of empathy for people, mainly because like my parents were military, so I saw so many different walks of life and so many different cultures I got to be immersed in. But I have empathy for people like that have to navigate the world differently than I do. Like and that's okay. Like I can hold space for them to know, like, listen, I don't have the answer, but like I know this may be difficult. I think the third thing for me in heal is like just a certain level of awareness. You should want to know about, as a leader, you should want to know about the things that are happening in the world that can affect the people on your team. Like you should want to know that. If you were a leader during the pandemic and you had people that were parents on your teams and they had to go home, like have an awareness to know that a lot of schools were not in person. So now that's a whole nother challenge for parents who never signed up to be teachers. Now they're basically like teacher age, trying to figure out how you set your kid up for the Zoom call. How do I make sure that there's lunch? Like we paid people or sent them to places that were responsible for that. So I think there's a certain level of awareness as a leader. And then I think the last one is like, I'm a strong believer of learned behavior. So I think the last part of like healing is like learn from these experiences, learn from what other people are going through, learn from the missteps of other leaders, but also learn from people that have to navigate hard. So like, I'll give you an example. We have ERGs, but we call them arbors because an arbor is a safe place for a plant to grow. Of course, our name is Greenhouse. So like we do all the plants. Like we love plants. Plants. You know, I got a plant right here. It's like we love plants.
I love it. If I were at my house right now, I'm surrounded by my plant babies. It's my happy place. So I'm here for it.
Yeah. So we have plants, right? So we wanted to start a caregiver ERG or arbor. And there were about 3 to 4 women that came up. One of them, one of my favorite people, Dina Alabade, on our marketing team. And they came up with this cool name called the Nursery. That was gonna be the name of it. And I came from Edelman before Greenhouse. So like I'm a sucker for a good brand. Like if you know how to do a good brand, like I'm a Vida, when Forum first told me, I was like, oh my goodness, I love that name. It's a great name. So you learn the naming behind it and like the Ecuadorian roots and it's beautiful, right? So like I think that's cool. So I'm like, oh, I love the Nursery. So like 2 weeks later, Dina comes to me, she's like, yeah, we can't name it the Nursery. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, that's a phenomenal name. You can't just abandon that name. It's a great name. She was like, yeah, but what we're realizing is like, it's not just caregivers who are parents. It's also reverse caregiving that are happening where kids are taking care of their parents now. And like, we don't want to exclude them. In fact, there's probably some great learnings that can happen between those populations. And we want to be a place where that's facilitated. And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's a great argument. But like, what are you going to do?
You're like, but the brand, but the brand.
The brand is so good. So she said, we came up with a better name. I was like, you can't get a better name than the nursery. She looks at me with the most confidence. You ever know when someone asks you the question, you already know the answer, and you can say it with confidence? So she looks at me, she says, the new name is called Full House. Oh my goodness. I started going crazy. I grew up watching Full House and seeing so many different, aunts and uncles in one place. So yeah, so like that was birth. That was a learning experience for me though,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I had to be aware of what she was going on. And like, I give her a lot of credit. She was aware of what was happening in our company, where it wasn't just parents that wanted to focus on caregiving. There were children who wanted to care for their parents. And so like that to me is like the L in heal, which is like, you gotta be willing to learn.
Mm.
The day that leaders know it all and are not willing to learn from their peers or the people on their teams is the day that they should no longer be in leadership.
I totally agree. That feels really approachable and helpful because I think a lot of us feel like, oh, now I need to be an expert in all these things. And now I need to be a media platform. And now I need to be XYZ. But it feels so much more like steps you can take. Like, I can be honest, I can be empathetic, I can take an interest in what's going on, and I can learn. Like, those are things as a leader I can do, even if I can't be an international relations expert tomorrow. And that's not what you're saying is the expectation. There was a story that I'm apparently a big Paul fangirl now from Uber that he shared that I thought was important and I wanted to bring up because I think a lot of this gets so centralized around these moments of tragedy or these really big moments of impact, and you can lose sight of the in-betweens. And he told this story about a team member who was Black, who was approached by a senior leader who was white on a day when something, they didn't tell the specifics, but I'm assuming something in 2020 had happened. And the CEO checked in with him and said, how are you doing? And he really didn't appreciate that interaction and felt like, you've not checked in with me once in the 8 years that I've been here. Why on my worst day are you doing this? And I think I can see certain leaders feeling fear from that story and saying, well, then should I just not say, is it better to say nothing than to say something? And that's not the message, I don't think. I think it's really understanding how that can feel authentic and consistent. So you have a lot of insight on what good allyship looks like, and what would your guidance be for leaders to make sure that those moments, to try to prevent those moments from happening, or only focusing on these big tragedies?
Yeah. First, I would just like to formally invite you to the Paul Saidi fan club.
Thank you. Do we have shirts?
Yeah, we'll get shirts. I'm a
Okay,
huge.
great.
He was my best friend at Edelman, and we had many, many very, very real, empathetic, emotional conversations. He's also the first person at Edelman I told when I got the job at Greenhouse.
Oh
Um,
my gosh, I love that.
I remember that story on that podcast. I think the thing I would say is like, as a leader, our job is to create space, not take up space.
Mm.
And taking up space to me is on a day when that CEO felt like probably some level of an emotional wreck, seeing people in their company, he thought it would be appropriate to go to someone he doesn't normally talk to. And he definitely doesn't talk to them about things that are emotional or facing their community. And because of their visual attributes, felt compelled to say something that came across completely performative. Now, I don't doubt that that CEO really wanted to know how that person was doing. I do doubt, like, had that situation not occurred, would you ever actually care how that person is navigating life?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, to me, in that instance, even with the best intentions, you can have poor execution. I believe the CEO's intentions were pure, but I think the execution was flawed because you've never spoken to this person like that before. And you have your lack of awareness to know what that person may be going through should have guided you to saying, this is probably not the right time. So when we talk about allyship, I think it's a 4-step process. The first one is invite. You have to find ways to invite people to shared spaces. So I'm going to take this example. Had that CEO said, hey, a couple leaders and us are getting together to, I don't know, go to the local pub or go to play Top Golf, or just a few of us are getting together to go grab lunch. would you like to grab lunch? If you would have said that to this individual, it would have been inviting. Even if the person says no, they view you as a way of like, how do I invite this person to this space? Again, creating space. I think the second one is, how do you engage them? It's not okay just to invite people to new spaces. Like there's a famous DEI quote. I forgot the practitioner, but they were like, diversity is inviting everybody to the party, and inclusion is asking them all to dance. And most people, when I say engage, they're like, oh, I just need to ask people to dance. No, it's more than that. If you only ask people to dance one time, that ain't real inclusion. Like, how do you engage these people on a regular and recurring basis where they start to know who you are? Like, where are you from? What do you stand for as a human being? Who are the people that are most important to you outside of just business? Like, how do you really engage them at a human level? I think after that, you have to empower people. There's so many people like right now, they have amazing ideas. I firmly believe this. This is a Donald hypothesis. I believe every company you can think of can be more profitable tomorrow than they are today, but they're sitting on potential because they don't empower people. Everyone in your organization should feel empowered to speak up, to be able to share that innovation, to be able to share thoughts that they have, to be able to demonstrate their creativity, maybe within the confines of their role or their department, or unless they're on a cross-functional team or project. But like, there's people showing up to work every day and they're not empowered to do their best work. The company hasn't unlocked their full potential. And in this case, this guy didn't empower this guy. He invited him one time in this one conversation. He didn't engage him over time, and he definitely didn't empower this person to speak up. And then the last one for me is championing people. Championing someone is talking positively around them when they're not in the room. Championing people. I had people champion me in my career. They talk about like, Donald, well, what about mentorship and sponsorship? Mentorship, sponsorship, allyship, they all fall underneath championing. You want to win a championship, you got to like champion other people. How are you speaking positive about them? And in my opinion, this guy, had he done all those things, the person he came to would have felt more comfortable in that situation, but he didn't. Mm-hmm. And so I try to look for those opportunities. At Greenhouse, we do random coffee buddy meetings. And look, I make it a hoot. I don't even talk about business. I always play any Zoom I start. I got music playing. You're going to hear my full Rolodex too in music. Like I did great. So you might hear Pink Floyd, you might hear Florida Georgia Line, you might hear Burna Boy. And then, of course, recently I've been on a big Beyonce and Taylor Swift run. So, like I do that at Greenhouse. Like when people are having a hard time, my favorite song to play is Shake It Off. We have a hard time right now, just shake it off. It's okay. We can get through this. Figure this out. So you got to inject humanity back in there. And I feel like if you do those things, if you follow those 4 stages of allyship, even in those moments where you have good intentions and poor execution, the reception will be better. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, look, I've been married and that happens with me. My wife will tell you I have poor execution sometimes. Sometimes I'm trying to solve a problem and she just wants to be heard. But because she knows my intentions, she doesn't discard me because she knows I actually care. So that's what I would tell people.
That's really helpful. I'm glad you brought up the like dollars and cents aspect to it too. And it's where we did start this conversation a little bit. For the leaders in the room who do believe in this and who do want to do this and who are trying to take these actions and who do want to invest in their teams through coaching and all these other avenues to empower them and to create this positive business outcome that can come. I'm sure you fight this fight all the time. We see it with our corporate clients. Like I know in my soul, in my gut that for business, period, full stop. But you still have to put it on a paper and make a pitch to a CFO or whoever needs sign off. So with these things that sometimes are like, can feel mushy or can seem in the business world, more like feel goody versus like the hard business metrics. How do you fight that fight? How would you tell these leaders to go back and build the case for dedicating their time, the company's time and resources to doing these things that we know are right?
Yeah, so this is great. I think this is, I'm going to give it, because you showed up today, whoever showed up today, you're going to find out how I pitch everything, by the way. So I always reverse engineer everything from profitability, because businesses are in the business of making money. There are businesses that are purpose-led and they want to do great things and they care about people. We're one of those businesses. Vida is one of those businesses. Tom's Shoes is one of those businesses. But at the end of the day, like, if a business that is not profitable can't go do the purpose, they can't have the impact on people that they want to have. So I always reverse from profitability. And of course, at every organization, the number one expense is people. So I always start with people. So I'm going to tell you what it is. When it comes to people, right? We know diversity of thought matters. We know that if they didn't, the C-suite would only be one person, the CEO. But every business has multiple people in their senior leadership or executive leadership team because they understand the value of diversity of thought. Diversity of thought comes from who? People. So you have people, now you have diversity of thought. What happens after diversity of thought? Creativity. We debate back and forth, we banter, creativity occurs. When creativity occurs, it drives what? Innovation. When you have innovation, it's going to increase what? Revenue. If you increase revenue, then a business is what? Profitable. So everything that I do is on that 6 steps. It starts with people, it ends with profitability. So what do I mean by that? Earlier, Nicole said, hey, Donald is a customer, I'm a Vida. How did I pitch that? We didn't have learning and development at Greenhouse before I got here. Zero. We had a stipend that we gave people. Some people actually used it on coaching. Some people used it on gym memberships. And my famous thing, that is a true story, one person actually used it on a washing machine. That is a true story. If you ask anybody at Greenhouse, it's a true story because I talk about it all the time. Like they reimburse themselves on their learning and development stipend for a washing machine. Now, I do believe development should be clean, but I don't think you should be able to go buy a washing machine with learning and development. So we took that portion of the stipend back and we built a whole team out of it. And what I tell people is like, listen, we're sitting on potential right now. We got to develop people. Like, not developing them, they're gonna get stuck in their career. And the side effects of that, whether they're at Greenhouse or not, is then they're not able to contribute at the maximum level that they can. They can't tap into discretionary effort. They cannot go be the most creative people who are driving innovation because no one has developed them. And so when I think about coaching, when I think about development, when I think about learning, it all ends with profitability. If I teach someone a new skill, they can apply that skill. If they apply that skill, they're going to be able to be more innovative. They can be more creative. If they do that, we're going to drive more revenue and be more profitable. But you got to figure that out. Now, inevitably, there's always one, if not a few, that'll say, well, Donald, not everybody's going to be able to do that. I agree with you. There's plenty of people that I've tried to invest in from a learning and development lens. It doesn't work out. Unfortunately, we zoom in on those people and we need to zoom out. That's not the majority of people. You go back to your classroom days, just think about your favorite teacher. Yeah, I'm sure there was somebody who was a disruptor in the class. That's not the majority of children, though. The majority of children actually show up every day and learn. So like, that's where I feel we have to, as leaders, we got to reverse engineer that for our organizations. And this is not just philanthropic or mushy. Like when people talk to me about like inclusion, diversity, equity, and allyship, I'm not teaching those skills for Greenhouse leaders because it's mushy. I'm teaching it because it's profitable. It's a profitable skill set. If you know how to engage men and women from all different backgrounds, and you know how to extract their greatest ideas from them, having them live up to their potential to create value for the business, you're going to be profitable. So you got to figure out how we speak that language. And unfortunately, during this pandemic, we've seen DE&I professionals impacted the most. And the reason why is I tell them, it's unfortunate. I have tons of friends in that profession. I even have people on my team that are in that profession. We didn't cut any of them at Greenhouse. But I tell people, it's like, they got to change their value prop. This isn't about just making the world come together and sing Kumbaya. No, this is profitability. When people know how to, if you can show up every day knowing that as a woman, your voice is going to be seen, valued, and heard, and you can impact business, if you're a person of color, if you know that if you're old, if you're young, if you're caring for parents, if you're caring for children, and you know when you come to this environment, you're empowered, you're championed to be your best self, that's a profitable business. So that's where I think we have to shift the conversation and like really start tying back Empathetic leaders get more from their teams. Vulnerable leaders get more from their teams. Leaders that are transparent get more for them from their teams. And so we gotta figure out how we start tying these human skills. They're not soft. There's nothing soft about it. They're human skills. How do you take human skills and tie them to profitability?
I love that. And I love human skills. I've seen like real skills or other words, but I love that definition of human skills versus soft skills. Well, we all got the cheat sheet. So thank you. That is so helpful for all of us in the room. While we're passing it to everyone to start thinking about the questions they have for Donald, my last question is, it feels like the common denominator in the frameworks that you've provided in the work that we need to do every day as leaders to build these environments, it all gets centered around trust. And that is such a huge component of any of these relationships being successful. So we've talked about a lot of different things today, and it can feel like a tall order for leaders who are already stressed and trying to hit the numbers and trying to do all these things to run the business, to also be thinking about this. What would you say is like one tiny thing they can do today or tomorrow to build a little bit more trust with their teams?
Yeah, this is a good one. I think so often I'm gonna go to my friend Hella, who's at Glossier, which is a phenomenal company, by the way. But she's talked about like at work we strategically vulnerable, and she's right. And I cringed when I heard it because I was like,
it feels like an oxymoron almost. Yeah.
it is an oxymoron. But the reality is, with certain leaders in certain environments, you can't be your most authentic self.
Yeah.
You can't be who you really are. And it's unfortunate. And so I think the one thing you can do as a leader is, with your teams respectively, chip away at that narrative. Chip away at least when they're in your presence, if they're on your team, if they're on your project. And the way you do that, you got to lead by example. So I'm vulnerable with my team. Like this morning, my team knew I had to cancel my morning meetings because me and my wife had an ultrasound appointment, and my daughter is on the way. She's due March 9th. She's
Oh
one pound.
my gosh. Congratulations.
Thank you. She's 1 pound 6 ounces.
Ah.
Right? Now, I don't have to tell my team that, but you better believe by me telling my team that, guess what happens when Will's son has a runny nose, or when Shalini's daughter has a sick day, or when Tisha's son needs to go to daycare, got the little flu bug running around. Like, you better believe by me sharing that with them, it makes it that much easier for them to not have to be strategically vulnerable. And so you got to figure out how you create those moments for your team. And if you're not there with your team, if you're like, Donald, I can't talk about baby shit, cool. Momentum builds momentum. So figure out what it is you can do. But I think it's on us as leaders to create those spaces. So that's what I would say to do.
That. That's amazing. And I'm so happy for you. That's so exciting.
Thank you.
Okay. Feel free to start dropping questions in the chat. We have a few minutes, so we can definitely take a couple questions. While you're getting your thoughts together, I will say, like we just said, there's probably two groups of you right now. One is like, this is a lot of information. I need to sit with this. I need to process this. I need to consume more. So we dropped a couple resources in there. Definitely listen to the People First podcast. We will send a recap tomorrow with the recording to this event, with our key takeaways, with the resources we mentioned. So you have time to just sit and process. And I invite you to respond to that and email me and share what you're thinking. If you have a question, maybe I can help point you in the right direction. Again, this is about honest leadership. I'm here to engage with each of you. So I'd love to hear what you're struggling with and how we can continue the conversation, because it is a conversation and not just a one-time chat that we're thinking about these things as leaders. So that's coming tomorrow. There may be those of you also who are like, I know, I believe, I want to do all this stuff, and I need support. And that's great too. And that's also why we're here. And so we will share the link right now to book a consultation with our team. If you haven't done coaching work before, it is so powerful to have that person in your corner who is there tailoring their work to you and what works for you as a leader and helping you find the path that feels authentic to you. So definitely take us up on the offer to book a free consultation with us, share a little bit more with what you're struggling with as a leader, and we would pair you with the right coach for you to help you navigate this.
Can I double click
Okay.
on that for a second?
Yeah.
All right. So the average person works 2,080 hours if you only work 40 hours a week. If you only work 40 hours a week, you work 2,080 hours. 10%, 10%. I'm going to challenge all of you. 10% of that time you should be investing in you.
Mm-hmm.
One of the easiest ways to invest in you is with a coach. I have a coach. I also have a therapist. They're two separate people, and I need both of them. But like I tell everybody, coaching is one of the greatest investments you can make in your life, because there are obstructed views that we have as leaders, even with the best intentions. And so my challenge to you is, look at how much you invested in yourself last year, or your company invested in you last year from a coaching perspective. And then for the next year, change that. Now, the goal for me is at least 10%. I believe my own self is worth at least 10%. That's 20 hours. You round up 21 hours. But I understand for some of you, maybe like 21 hours is very, very difficult for me to do. Donald, last year I invested 0. Cool, do 10% of that. Find a way to get 2 hours worth of coaching. 2 hours. Your leaders will find ways to invest in you. And if they don't, you make them a pitch. It's profitable. All right, I'm gonna give you the pitch. Here's the pitch. I would be a more profitable leader if I'm able to work out the kinks inside of my leadership. So what I'm willing to do is go half on it with the organization. I'll pay for an hour, you pay for an hour. And if we find it to be successful, we continue to invest in my coaching. It's gonna be an amazing investment for you. But I always try to tell people, we have humans that are navigating the world, and they're pouring more into organizations than they're pouring into themselves. And that's unfortunate. So find ways to pour into yourself.
Incredible. It took me actually becoming an entrepreneur and of a coaching organization to really embody that, because it did feel hard, and it did feel like, oh, I'm taking time away to do this thing, where now I totally have the mindset that if today spending this 1 hour in therapy or with my coach or learning a new skill is what's going to enable me to do my job better, then that's the most important thing I need to do today. So I absolutely empower you all to do the same. Okay, we have a question that came in that says, how do you approach empathy and inclusion with people who are very closed off?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Many people that are closed off is because they've been harmed in spaces that they thought that they can be safe. So they're hesitant in those environments. And so what I try to do with closed off people is not influence them to get them to this point, right? Like, no, like people should be okay with whatever walls of safety and protection they've put up for themselves that allow them to navigate this world. Because there are people that have gone through instances that literally are unbearable, like, and no human should go through those things. So I don't try to knock the wall down. What I want them to know, though, is if they ever walk past that wall, that they got someone that's there to support them. So one of the easiest ways for me to do that is I actually spend time with those people. So it's like, listen, let's just do a coffee session. Little coffee meeting. Hey, how are you? Let's not talk about business. What's going on? What did you do this weekend? If you want to, one of my favorite things, everybody does icebreakers. I think Nicole and Forum know this. I love ice cream. So I do ice cream breakers. So when I meet with people, I'll be like, hey, listen, hey, Nicole, I'll do this live. This is great. I didn't know this question was going to come. So Nicole, if you had to choose a flavor of ice cream to describe you, not your leadership, not like you just you as a human, what would that flavor be and why? This is great. I get to be
I'm gonna go with what's also my favorite flavor of ice cream, which is cookie dough, because when you first glance at it, you don't see a lot of depth to it, but once you get in there, there's more goodies that get unlocked as you peel back all the different layers of the ice cream.
I like that. Now, first of all, let's give it up for Nicole. She did not know I was going to ask her that on the spot. But yeah, that's one of the easiest ways you can do that. Now, you do that with the closed off person, they're going to do the same thing. There's universal languages. So, ice cream, universal languages. Food is a universal language. Sports, I lived all over the world. You have a ball in your hand, universal language. Even if people don't, they're not good at it. Music, universal language. Dance, universal language. These are all languages that all of us can speak with other people. And it brings the defense level down. Another one that I like to use is like, when you think about your leadership style, if you had to think about your favorite teacher in school, who was it and why?
Mrs.
And
Welch.
everyone remembers
Easy.
that. Who is it? Who's your favorite teacher, Nicole?
Mrs. Welch, she was the best.
What was it about Miss Welch? What did she do?
Everything was out like creative and outside of the box. It wasn't just like read from the textbook. It was how can we have a tactile experience or learn about history through learning to make something. Like it just felt so different and every day was unique.
Now, when you woke up this morning in Arizona,
Mhm.
did you know we were going to talk about Miss Welch today?
Sure did not, but I'm sure glad we did. And I'm going to email her after this.
See, this is what happens with humans.
Mhm.
Like we categorize all these in memories,
Mhm.
particularly even those great ones. And so for the person who's closed off, you just brought forward for them a very positive memory. So those are just
Mhm.
two for the person who ever asked that question. Those are the two that I would tell you. And over time, you will find you become, they don't put the walls down, but guess what? You get invited in the room because you're now
Mhm.
part of that safe space um, for them. So that's what I would leave
Yeah.
you.
So good because we've talked conceptually, but we also have these really tangible things to try. So Donald, this was incredible. And one thing I'm glad you mentioned, and we see this a lot. Um, if you're the leader who's bringing the safe space and the vulnerability and the authenticity, and you're approaching folks who do have those walls, I'm glad you mentioned that you don't see what their past experience was like and what their past workplaces were like and what past things they've had to deal with. And so even if you're bringing your best intention, there still might be a lot of hurt that has nothing to do with you. So I love how you said it's okay that those walls are there. Those walls protect us, but here's how we start to get invited in. Incredible. I know we have a couple other questions and I want to make sure we get those answered. So we'll definitely follow up with the folks who shared questions, but we are at time. And I want to make sure that we know, Donald, how do we stay in touch with you? Anything else that's happening at Greenhouse that we need to know about? Any final words for the community?
Yeah, first of all, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me. This is such an amazing opportunity to like just talk freely and openly. Yeah, if you want to stay connected, I'm on Vida. You can share my email address, or I'm on LinkedIn /Proximity Night. I'm literally on every social media platform as Proximity Night, so it makes it easy to find me. Um, Great things that are going on at Greenhouse. Look, we're an amazing hiring software company. So we get to like help those people who want to join those locations or environments where they can be themselves, where they can be authentic, where they have inclusive and empathetic leaders. Like we try to work with those companies. And so many of them you probably heard of, like Airbnb and Instacart. But yeah, if you have a need from a hiring perspective, or you want to see what makes our tool very different from many others, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to give you VIP treatment. I think the last
Ooh.
thing I'll leave you with is this. The end of the day, we're all just people. So please take time today to do something for the most important person in your life, which is you. Find something to do that makes you better. If you do that, I promise you I'll smile. And if you do so with ice cream, I'll smile for a very long time because I love ice cream.
I love it. Thank you so much, Donald, for your wisdom, for your advice, for your time. This was absolutely incredible. And I want to commend everyone for being here. Please do something else for you today, but the fact that you spent an hour with us this morning is amazing. I know that a lot of these topics can be challenging, they can be confronting, it can be a lot to think about. So kudos to you for being here, for investing this time in yourself, for being open to taking in these new ideas. We're really grateful to have leaders like you in our community and welcome for those of you who are new. Thank you again, and we'll talk soon.